how does the mind work? How do we study something that's invisible? And how do I understand my own mind? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 concepts to help you understand how I understand my own mind and how depth psychology, the study of the human mind, is even possible that it exists. I'm going to be breaking down these 3 concepts of induction and also some projection ideas. And you're going to, by the end of the video, understand how your mind works at a little bit of a deeper level. And you're going to understand how I understand and how it's possible to look at your own mind and pull it apart and understand it and break it down into the different parts and how they work and the different functions of those parts. Before we get into the video, I just want to mention that I've put together a completely free mind mastery blueprint. It's just a simple guide on the basics of depth psychology so you can understand what goes into every one of your decisions. And the link's in the pinned comments in the description. Completely free, takes less than 5 minutes to read. Anyway, let's jump into the video. So the first thing we need to talk about is induction. And that's the study of things that are invisible. So we know that gravity exists and we know that energy exists. But how is it possible to study things we can't see? How can we possibly study gravity? It's something that's invisible, but it's a force that's there, and it affects everything we do. It affects the world around us, and all of our decisions that we make are made within the system of gravity. It affects us. And so how do we study something that is invisible, something we can't see? The way we do that is by a process of study called induction. And what it does is it studies the relationship between 2 objects. So for example, Newton was the guy who kind of first came up with gravity and made the 3 laws. So how did he kind of see it? And he saw the apple fall from the tree. This is the story that we know. And so what he can see is he can see an apple and he can see a tree. He can see 2 things, 2 objects interacting in a particular way. The apple, why does it behave in this way? And so gravity is just the relationship between 2 objects or 2 other things. And so we study things that are invisible by understanding and studying the relationship. How do they move? How do they react? How can they operate in different environments, in different situations? And then by keeping the objects the same and understanding the relationship, that relationship can then be studied as this thing that's invisible. And so gravity is studied in exactly that way. We study objects in motion, objects in different situations, and by analyzing how they move and all these different kinds of things, we can extrapolate the relationship, and that's what we got here. So the mind is very similar, but with the mind, we have to study the different objects of the mind, and those are the 4 functions of consciousness, which we'll get into, and then how they affect or how they impact the individual. And so what we look at are the 2, in depth psychology, what we look at are, first of all, we looked at thoughts, feelings, sensation, and intuitions. So those are the 4 conscious functions. And then we look at other things like dreams, fantasies, like imagination, these other things. These are objects of the mind. So even right now, you're watching this video and maybe different thoughts are coming up in your mind. Maybe you think, man, this guy Daniel is so handsome. And then maybe you think something else. Maybe when I said those words, you had a positive feeling come up or a negative feeling come up. Maybe you laughed. Maybe you got irritated. These are all different objects of the mind. These are different observable things that we can look at. So, there's a relationship there. I said some words, so you heard some sounds, and then you had a positive feeling or a negative feeling. You might watch this video, and then you have a thought rises into your mind. You might eat some food, and then a positive feeling and a thought of, this is delicious comes into your mind. These are relationships that we can study. And similarly, we can study maybe what's going on in a person's life. What is the situation of their entire life? What is their perception of the situation that they're in consciously? And then what dreams are they having? And we can make these connections and kind of study these relationships of objects that we can see and we can observe. The key is that we can observe. And then we can make deductions about the relationship between these different objects. And so that's how we study psychology. Now, how is that possible? First of all, it's very kind of difficult to step outside of yourself and look at your own mind. That's a kind of difficult thing to do. However, with human consciousness, that's what we are able to do. You can step outside yourself and look at yourself from a critical point of view. You can say, okay, I got angry yesterday and I said these words to that person and I didn't want to say them, but for some reason this feeling came over me and I said these words. That's a observable relationship where we can We can study what actually happened there. We can study, okay, this is what I'm thinking and experiencing about this situation in my life, this situation which is just, I'm always thinking about, I'm so stressed about. And then I'm having these dreams with these images. Okay, or these nightmares with these particular images. Okay, what's the connection there? What's the relationship? Can we study something? Is there any connection? When we are able to observe these connections and these relationships, that's how we understand the mind. And that's how we understand anything that we kind of can't see or anything that's invisible. Because what we're studying is this. It's this relationship. The thing that we're studying which is invisible is the relationship. And so the way that we do that in psychology is predominantly, the only reason we are able to do it is because humans are able to look at themselves. You're able to look at your own mind. And it's kind of weird because it's like a paradox, like this is your mind and then you're looking at your own mind and whatever. But just keep it simple. You're able to observe yourself by kind of, in the moment, it's very, very difficult. But in the looking at the past and past memories, you're able to understand, okay, look, I was thinking this thing, this feeling was coming over me, or I was, I sensed this thing, I hugged my friend, and then, this thought came over me, like, well, why did I think that? Why did that thought come up in my mind? I didn't consciously make it appear. Why did I feel this particular feeling? Sometimes we have massive emotional breakthroughs or massive feelings come up over us, and we don't know why. Now, the key here is, this is the last part of, how I actually understand my own mind. And the key here is it's a very difficult thing to do because it's tied up in something called the shadow and the persona, but I want to just keep it simple for this video. And what happens is when we look at something that we don't understand, let's just say we're looking at Egyptian hieroglyphics. And I'm just going to assume that you cannot read Egyptian hieroglyphics. If you can, that's pretty awesome. If you're looking at a wall of on a pyramid and there's a bunch of these hieroglyphics, there's random symbols and all this drawings and artwork and stuff. And when you look at it, it's just a whole bunch of gibberish. It's just nonsense. It's like, it's a bunch of nonsense. But when someone else looks at it who understands it, there's actually a whole bunch of, what you see is gobbledygook. You're looking at it, you see a whole bunch of mess and garbage, but then somebody else can see it and they can see the clear form, the clear structure, and it makes perfect sense. And so what that means is actually, for example, with the Egyptian hieroglyphics, you might look at it and see nonsense. And you might say, this is just a whole bunch of garbage. It's a whole bunch of confusing nonsense and it means nothing. It's just crazy. But actually, there is a clear form and structure to it, and there's logic behind it. There is a cause and effect. There's things going on that have relationships to each other that you just don't understand and can't see. And so this is the biggest problem of, I guess, humanity looking at the psyche, is that, it's very difficult to look at somebody who's insane. This is kind of how depth psychology was, I guess, born initially, is by studying people who are, in these insane asylums or whatever, and they have these massive problems, these big problems of the mind. And so, most people would just, look at somebody who has a huge problem of the mind and just say, they're crazy. It's just a mess. There's just a whole bunch of messy, they're just crazy. And that's it. They wouldn't even think beyond that. But when you actually, what happens is when you look at yourself and you say, wait a second, I'm crazy. I'm looking at these Egyptian hieroglyphics and it's meaningless to me. But that's not a fault. That's not the fault of the hieroglyphics. That's my fault. I'm the one who's crazy. I'm the one who's confused. I'm the one who's looking at this thing and I have no idea. That's a difficult thing to accept, especially if you're, you can imagine being a practicing psychiatrist or psychologist, after all these years of study, and then you come across a patient and it's like looking at Egyptian hieroglyphics and you're like, holy, what is this nonsense? This person is crazy, get him away from me. But actually, the real situation is that there is a form, a set of, causes and effects. There is a whole bunch of meaning and these relationships that are going on. And there's just this interconnected, very complex world of relationships and things that are going on that you don't understand. That's what the situation is. And, that is basically a difficult thing to do because you have to step down and recognize that you are stupid and you have no idea in order to be able to actually see the truth and see what the situation really is. And so when I'm looking at my own mind, this is something that I always, keep in mind, is I just remember, okay, I don't know what's happening here. Maybe there's some feeling coming over me. Maybe I'm in a situation and these random thoughts are coming up into my mind. Maybe, there's a whole situation in my life I don't understand. Maybe I'm having these dreams. Maybe I'm having nightmares. And, I don't know why what is this nonsense? I mean, dreams are a perfect example. It's what people do immediately when they have a dream or a nightmare. The most crazy, random shit happens. I gotta swear, just because I'm passionate about this. And it's, you just wake up and you're like, what? And then you just go on with your day. That's it. Because it's like looking at the hieroglyphics. You're not going to sit there and spend hours pulling apart everything and just trying to work it out on your own. It's just impossible. It's too hard. It's just a bunch of nonsense, right? That's what we think. In reality, dreams they have a clear purpose, a clear form, structure, that they can be explained, and have been explained. And so, we're just looking at something that we think is nonsensical and crazy and meaningless, but actually does have meaning and clear purpose and can be understood. It's just that we don't understand it yet. That's it. And, what stops people from understanding is this, quality of believing they're smart or that they know or whatever. And I've gone over that in other videos. But yeah, when you're looking at your own mind, if you're trying to understand it, and so when I'm looking at my mind, I'm trying to understand it, and these crazy things happen or weird things happen and I don't understand what's going on. The first step is to understand that, okay, I don't understand, but there is some reason, there is some kind of relationship here, there is some kind of connection that I just can't see. And so when you're able to see that, when you're able to accept that and understand that, then you can begin to study this connection, and you can begin to observe what's going on. And that gives you understanding and power, because you're going to understand more about the different parts that are within you. Why do I get angry when someone talks about this subject? Why do I get sad when I think about this subject? Why, when I'm in this sensory situation, when I'm at the gym, or when I'm, on a flight, do I enter this psychological state? Why do I feel these feelings? Why do I think these thoughts? Just asking the question why, and searching for an answer, that's the first step. And when you do that consistently, and it's I'm basically addicted to it. I'm basically obsessed with it. Just when you do this over a long period of time, you just get a deep level of understanding of yourself. And one of the more kind of ways to fast track this, and the way I understand my own mind, is I constantly have these books on hand. I'll just go off camera and grab it for 1 sec. But even today, I was just thinking about some stuff. I was remembering which book had a glimpse of information or a little passage to describe what I was experiencing in my own mind. And when you do that kind of over a longer period of time, you're gonna differentiate. Like the key here is reading all these books, and they're so big and thick and dense, and they're so technical. That's one thing, but that's a technical understanding, and it's essentially useless on its own, which is a tough thing to accept. And this is what I've experienced talking to other people who've, they've read the books. They haven't connected what they've read to what's in their own mind. They haven't actually done that. The best example that I like to give is, there's the doctor, the surgeon who's, performed or understands and read every textbook on glandular fever. Or let's just say something glandular fever is this horrible throat infection that you get. It's so bad, your throat goes all pussy and you can't even swallow, and it's really painful, and it lasts for months. It's just horrible, right? So he might understand every symptom, everything about that sickness or whatever. Then, that's the theory side of it. That's like reading all the textbooks. Then you have somebody else, okay, never studied a single word of any textbook about glandular fever, and they just get glandular fever, and they experience the pain, the swallowing, every symptom, the effects that it has on your psyche, the emotional, so the feelings, thoughts, sensations, and intuitions, everything that they experience, the hunger, the loneliness, whatever, everything, right? That's the experience of something, and then there's the knowledge of something. So we have two people here. One's got all the knowledge and understanding of what it is, and one's got the actual lived experience of what it is. And so who understands it better? This is a good question. And the key here is that it's the third guy who studied everything and also experienced it himself. So he's had glandular fever, then he's got all the textbook knowledge, and he puts them together for a complete understanding of the entire subject. So the same thing happens in psychology, where you can read everything about dreams, but if you've never looked at your own dreams, like what are you doing? If you've read everything about moral conflict, and then you don't apply that knowledge to your own life when you face moral conflict, well, there's no connection being made. You're not developing a practical knowledge. You're not actually developing any kind of useful skill and understanding of psychology, because it's just this idea, this kind of woo-woo like idea that's out there, and it's just this cool intellectual thing, but there's no practical, like, down to earth, on the ground, in the trenches application of what you've understood. And the first place that you practice and understand depth psychology specifically is in yourself. You don't even attempt, basically, you don't even like attempt to, treat a patient when you haven't even done the first, level of like shadow integration or conscious expansion, and you haven't, it's kind of just, it doesn't make sense to do, because you're not going to be effective as a practical therapist without doing that. I won't go into heaps of detail there, but basically, yeah, when you're looking at your own mind, just pay attention to the relationships between different things, and watching my videos and stuff, hopefully I'm educating you a bit more on what I've learned and what I've actually found in my own mind, and what I've learned in the books too. Hopefully it is valuable, but as always, you can feel free to completely discard anything I say if it's not valuable. I just did a video on destiny, and what I was talking about was how in the individual, in you, you're so completely unique that maybe something that I say isn't useful to you right now or ever, just because it may be useful to somebody else but not you, or maybe be useful to nobody, who knows. But hopefully you do enjoy my videos, and hopefully this video was valuable and you learned a little bit more about how I understand my own mind. So by the process of induction, by stepping outside myself and observing what's happening in my mind and not just kind of experiencing it. So, we think that all of our thoughts are ours, but are they? We think that the feelings that we experience they just exist, and that's what the truth is. Is it? Are our feelings of positivity or love towards somebody because we love them? Or is there a deeper thing going on? Is there something deeper going on? Maybe is there a projection? Is there a part of our personality which we're unconscious of, which is projected onto them? That's why we love them. What about the different things we're fascinated by? Am I fascinated by this topic of economics because, what I think it is? It's just, I want to make money? Or am I fascinated because of some other reason, of its complexity and how it's similar to the human psyche with the transition channels? These are just my things, but maybe yours is, am I attracted to this girl or this boy because they're physically attractive, or is there something else there? Is there confidence? Is there an undeveloped part of my personality which I see in them, which is attracting me to them because I want to develop that part of my personality? The questions go deep, and when you look at your own psyche and you kind of take a step back from living through your own psyche and observe it, then you're going to start to understand your own mind. And that's how I understand my mind. I obviously live my life and I do things and I have thoughts and I have feelings, whatever. And then I also observe myself and my mind as I'm going through life and as I'm going through different situations, different transformations. Big transformations happen when you do something that's a big change, either in your inner world, in your mind, or in the outside world. So for example, I left my family home and I left my parents, and so you're thrust into a physically different environment, but also a psychologically different environment, because you're no longer, taken care of. You have to be self-sufficient, and that's how you develop your personality, is by doing new things. And as you're doing new things, as you're meeting new people, as you're progressing through life, you might experience a tragedy or you might experience a triumph. Observe your mind. Just see what's happening. See how different things change. And it doesn't have to be on a huge level. You can just, you might get hungry and then think, a thought arises into your mind, or an image rises into your mind of like your favorite food. And then maybe you have an opposing feeling or thought that you should not eat that favorite food and you should eat something healthy. It could be something really simple. Just observing all these little things that are happening inside your mind all the time. That's how I, understand my own mind. For example, just quickly, I'm talking to the camera. I'm I'm confident about what I'm saying, and then I'm also doubting what I'm saying. So there's this conflict in my mind. I'm doubting whether I've explained it properly, whether you're understanding it. I'm thinking about how I look. There's all these different things going into my mind. My eyes are kind of sore from the lights. There's all different, this pen, the sensation in my hand, whatever. I'm wondering if my audio is good on the video. There's all these different things happening in your mind all the time. And by living through your life and observing yourself, that's how you're going to become more conscious of what's going on inside your mind and differentiate different parts of it, and how you're going to understand the different relationships behind or between the different things you experience in yourself and in the outside world and with other people. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, I'm posting new ones every single day, so click subscribe. And if you want to take the next step and go a little bit deeper into depth psychology and understanding how all of your decisions are made and the 4 conscious functions behind all of your decisions, then I've put together a free mind mastery blueprint. It's totally free, takes less than 5 minutes to read, and you can grab it from the link in the description and the pinned comments. So hopefully you find that valuable. And other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.